Author Donna Jodhan presents The Baby Bunny. That was the name that she was given from the time she was born. A beautiful baby with a disposition of a baby bunny. Gentle, happy, and always with a smile. But then she grew up, and something changed along the way. What she witnessed one day changed her life forever. She tried to do what was right, but for her, it turned out to be very wrong. Then, she had to run for her life. Find out whether or not she managed to save herself.
Hello there, it's Detective DJ, and I'm back for another episode. I hope that everyone is having a great day, and I hope that everyone has been having a terrific week. Maybe you've done something today that you would like to share with us. Or maybe you have had to do something today that really brought great happiness and joy to you. Whatever it is, I hope it was great. I want to thank you again for stopping by to listen in. And I want to thank you too for helping to solve these mysteries. Your feedback is always important. And boy, are we getting lots of feedback on who you think has done it. Even after I've told you who has done it, you write to me telling me that you feel that someone else could have done it. And which is great because you're thinking all the time. Anyways, I know that you have already had or heard the description to this particular episode, the baby bunny. It may be a very strange name, but you know what? I love creating strange names because it throws the listener off for as long as possible before they're able to solve the mystery. So, without much more ado, it's time for us to dive right into this episode and see what we could come up with. Again, here is our team. Dr. Shay Harrington, resident psychologist. Chip Sanderson, our crime scene investigator and all-round investigator. Ryan Martini, Dr. Ryan Martini, our crime scene specialist. Dr. Nicholas Gasquet, our pathologist. And Alex Kirchhoff, our resident guru and whiz kid. So, folks, it's time for us to learn more about the baby bunny. And I always start my episodes with telling you a bit about what is happening moments before the crime. It is a beautiful mid-spring day, and white clouds are gliding gracefully high in the sky. And the blue of the sky, mingled with the golden color of the sun, combine to produce a magnificent picture all around. Kids are playing football in the lush green fields, and swimmers are already sampling the very deep blue sea. One would say that this blue sea is peaceful, and in some parts of the sea it looks like blue glass. Dogs are digging huge, gaping holes in the damp yellow sand of the beach. While all this is going on, a crime has taken place. And someone has used a cell phone to summon the cops. As kids playing on the edge of a small lagoon have discovered a giant body bag. As the cops approach, they're greeted by a small group of excited kids, asking all kinds of questions, while some adults make feeble attempts to control them. Barking dogs can be heard on the beach, and the cops soon take possession of the crime scene, forcing the small but growing crowd to move back. Just about or just before they set about to open the bag, two screaming seagulls race overhead, scaring some of the gathered ones. The cops form a tight ring around the ominous bag, doing their best to shield the contents as it is slowly opened. The look on their faces confirm it all for the bystanders. It is the body of a young lady, and all that bystanders are permitted to see is a head of long red hair. The cops ask the crowd to leave, and they grudgingly do so. Some turn and quickly walk away, while a few stragglers stand and watch from a distance. Within the hour, the body is taken away to the morgue, and the crime scene is secured as best as possible. The shallow lagoon is dragged and searched, and something very interesting is found, and this is bagged and taken away. Now the cops must start their investigation. According to Dr. Shea Harrington, she is saying that the killer did their dirty work in a remote spot. And the perfect occasion for this to have taken place was that the victim may have probably been walking on the beach. And the victim's reason for having been there is that the person may have been on vacation. This is all speculation on the part of Dr. Shea. We still don't have anything as of yet to share with you. Well, the motives, according to Chip, is as follows. And this may sound so repetitious to you, but here we go. According to Chip, he's saying that someone may have wanted to cover up a past crime. Someone may have wanted to kill a blackmailer, or the victim may have been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Dr. Shea has developed a profile, or a potential profile, for our suspect. Here it is. The suspect may have been someone sent to do a killing, but then again, they had killed without mercy, and they were brutal when they did it. The killer had probably laid in waiting and had struck when the victim was off guard. Just speculation for now. But now we're going to look at Chip's investigation. And this is what he has submitted to us. True it is that the cops have found the body of a lady with long red hair in a body bag at the edge of a lagoon. But they were not quite sure as to the identity of this body. True it is that some clues had been found at the bottom of the lagoon. Forensics had tentatively identified the body as that of Maura Lansing, a young fashion model who had been staying at a nearby beach hotel. And the passport found was that belonging to someone closely resembling a lady of similar age and build. And her name was Carolyn Radcliffe. To add to the mystery, the parents was refusing to identify the dead lady's body as that of their daughter Maura. They claimed that a prominent birthmark on Mora's chest was missing. For whereas Mora had borne a prominent birthmark on her chest, this body bore no birthmarks. Carolyn Radcliffe had also been a fashion model and had also been staying at the same hotel, but she too was now missing. Initial investigations of the two ladies turned up the following. Mora Lansing had been born to Mr. and Mrs. Mark Lansing, and as a child she had been nicknamed the Baby Bunny because of her red hair and gentle disposition. Mora had been a happy child, always smiling with everyone, and for most of her childhood she had maintained her disposition. But one day something had changed, and Mora had turned into a very disturbed teenager. She had told her parents that she had witnessed someone killing another, and that the killer had seen her watching as they had carried out their crime. Mora had stumbled home to tell her parents, and they had decided to keep it to themselves. This had happened several years ago. Both Mora and her parents had hoped that by not going to the cops, the whole thing could have been swept under the carpet. Unfortunately, fate had had other ideas. As always, eh? And after all of these years, fate had found it necessary to rear its ugly head by bringing misery to Mora and her parents. Mr. and Mrs. Lansing told the cops that in the last few months, Mora had started to receive several strange phone calls, along with threatening texts and emails. Several of these strange phone calls had come at all hours of the night, and Mora had told her parents that she was afraid for her life. After much deliberation, Mora had decided to go to the cops with her story, but she was somewhat afraid that they would not believe her, because what she had allegedly witnessed had involved a very high-profile person. The crime in question had taken place several years previously. Mora and Carolyn had recently gotten to know each other, and it was only coincidental that they had been vacationing at the same hotel at the same time. They had discovered this 2 days before the murder occurred, as they had run into each other at the hotel's lobby at supper hour, and they had been overheard making tentative dinner plans. These plans had been made on the same day that Mora had been supposedly killed. No one knew whether or not they had actually met. Before the killing, Carolyn had shared something very important with Mora, and as it had turned out, they had both shared secrets that were both closely related. Mora had the misfortune to witness the following. It was a beautiful summer's day, and it was very, very sunny, as Mora remembers. And as she later told her parents, there had come a sudden burst of screams from somewhere behind one of the hedges on the street. Before Mora could react, Lucky was off and running and barking loudly. Mora had decided to reconnoiter the scene before deciding what to do. She had quickly found the source of the screams and stood rooted to the ground, holding on to Lucky for dear life and doing her best to keep him still. As Maura watched in horror, two ladies were fighting at the edge of the pool, and it was a huge fight. And then the scene had turned to horror for Maura. As she watched, one lady had pushed the other lady into the pool. It appeared to Maura that the one pushed into the pool was unable to swim, and that the other knew this because she distinctly heard her say the following words: "No way for you to escape now, because you can't swim to save yourself." Then Maura had watched in even more horror as one lady had slowly drowned, while the other had stood there watching with a smile on her face. Then a neighbor had come running out of her home, but before she could discover what had happened, the one who had pushed the other into the pool had somehow managed to find a leaf picker and had used it to push the body of her victim under the water and hold it there while talking to the neighbor. The other neighbor had never seen the body being held under the water, and after a few minutes she had returned to her own home. At first, Maura was not too sure as to what to do, and as she was making up her mind, the lady killer had turned in her direction and had spotted a frightened Maura and her dog Lucky. At that moment, Maura and Lucky had fled, but it was too late. The lady had seen her and had somehow recognized her. In the case of Carolyn Radcliffe, she had told Maura that some years ago her mom had been killed in a drowning in accident in a pool. But Carolyn had never believed this, because her mom would never have gone near a pool. She could not swim, and she had been terrified of water. Carolyn had also told Maura that shortly before her so-called accident, her mom had told her that her dad had been having an affair with a well-known socialite, and that her dad had confessed it all and had promised Carolyn's mom to break it off. Carolyn had told Maura that she had decided to start unraveling the mystery of her mom's untimely death, and that she had recently come across something among her dad's papers while putting his things in order, as he had recently passed on due to a sudden heart attack. But Carolyn had become suspicious over her father's death, because there were things about how he had died that had worried her, and she had begun her own private investigation. Carolyn's dad was Dr. Christian Radcliffe, a high-profile doctor who had attended to several high-profile patients. Maura had told all of this to her parents, and Maura's final phone call to her parents occurred on the day that she had been supposedly killed, and she had told her parents that she was going to tell all after all. She had also told her parents that there was much more to her having witnessed a crime on that fateful day. There was someone who had desperately wanted to keep a past crime hidden, and they would have done anything in order to have done so. And there was someone else who had wanted to silence a blackmailer, because the latter had uncovered the truth about them. And this, if it were to come to light, could spell big trouble. There was yet someone else who had felt that they needed to silence a particular person because they had seen something which they should never have seen. Chip has identified the following suspects for us. There was Paolo Campino, who was a well-known mafia boss. Fred Gant, who was a record producer. And Keith Denby, a forensics investigator. The cause of death, as identified by Dr. Nicholas Gasquet, is that the victim had been strangled to death, as marks had been found about her neck and throat. There were no defensive wounds found on her body, and this suggests that she had been caught off guard. Their body had been stuffed into a body bag and dragged to the edge of the lagoon, where it had been found about a day after it had been bobbing around in the shallow part of the lagoon. How it might have been done? Again, according to Dr. Nick Gasquet, is that the killer could have stalked the victim without her knowing, had probably followed her to the beach, had surprised her with his presence, and had quickly overpowered her. He had then strangled her, placed her in a body bag, and then dragged the body bag to the edge of the lagoon, leaving it there for someone to find it. My goodness. I want now to summarize for you so that you start getting all the pieces together in order to try and solve this mystery. So, moving forward, you know the crime scene. You know that kids have found a body bag bobbing up and down in the shallow portion of the lagoon. The cops have been called, and they have come and they have opened up the body bag, and you see where the body bag contains the body of a young lady with long red hair. Okay? You know that the location is a bit remote, and the occasion was probably that the victim may have been walking on the beach when they were overpowered, and the victim was there probably on vacation. This is all according to Dr. Shea. And the profile of the suspect, as she has developed it to be, is that the suspect may have been someone sent to do a killing. They were brutal and had killed without mercy. They had probably lay in waiting and had struck when the victim was off guard. The suspects? Paolo Campino, a well-known mafia boss, Fred Gant, a record producer, and Keith Denby, a forensics investigator. Alex has some very interesting questions for you to consider, and he always starts off with the same question. And he asks, which of the suspects could have had the greatest motive? Which of them felt that they had to keep hidden a past crime? Which of them felt that they had to silence a blackmailer? And which of them felt that they had to silence the victim because they had seen something? And was the victim really Maura Lansing? Then, if not, who was it? Could the passport found at the bottom of the lagoon help to unravel this mystery? Could Maura's and Carolyn's story be related in any way? Did Maura and Carolyn really meet, after all, for dinner? Where could Carolyn be right now? Interesting. Right, let's go on, and I want to just nip back to the description of this particular episode. Okay, so again, this is meant to keep you in the loop and to keep you focused. Okay, so this was a name that was given to this little girl from the time she was a baby, at least from the time she was born. A beautiful baby with the disposition of a baby bunny. Gentle, happy, and always with a smile. But then she grew up and something had changed along the way. What she witnessed one day had changed her life forever. She tried to do what was right, but after all, it was the wrong thing. Then she had to run for her life. Find out whether she had managed to save herself. You know the crime scene? You know about the body bag being found by the kids? You know that the body that was found in the bag, the young lady with the long red hair? You know about the suspects? Paolo Campino, who was a well-known mafia boss, Fred Gaunt, a record producer, and Keith Denby, a forensics investigator. Okay. Alex's important questions? Which of these suspects could have had the greatest motive? Which of them felt that they had to keep hidden a past crime? Which of them felt that they had to silence a blackmailer? Which of them felt that they had to silence the victim because they had seen something? And was the victim really Maura Lansing? If not, then who was the victim? Could the passport found at the bottom of the lagoon help to unravel this mystery? Could Maura's and Carolyn's stories be related in any way? Did Maura and Carolyn meet after all for dinner? And where could Carolyn be? Wow, a lot to consider. But let's see what additional facts Dr. Ryan Martini has uncovered for us through the gathering of evidence. Maura's story and Carolyn's story were indeed very related. The victim had been strangled close to where the body bag with her body had been found. Maura and Carolyn did meet for dinner after all, on the day that she had supposedly been killed. Maura did not tell her parents that she was going to have dinner with Carolyn. Carolyn had unearthed some very important information among her dad's papers, and this had directly or indirectly rather, linked him to his wife's death. Carolyn had been using what she had discovered among her dad's papers to help her unravel the mystery of her mom's death. Carolyn's dad had once had an affair with a lady who Maura had seen pushing another to her death. On that fateful day, the three suspects were all inadvertently related in some way, all inadvertently linked in some way. My. I want to tell you now a bit more about each of the suspects. Paolo Campino, of course, was a well-known mafia boss, and he was a very influential man about town, and he was not one to stand for any nonsense. His business dealings had reached far and wide, and he had run a very tight ship when it came to controlling his underlings. He did not like to be humiliated, and his way of fixing things was to do it for himself. Paula had been married to a very beautiful socialite, and both she and he had been known to fool around outside of their marriage. Paolo did not have any kids with his marriage, but had been previously married with 2 kids. Fred Gant was a record producer. Fred had been a very successful record producer and had been good friends with Paolo Campino and his wife. Some had even whispered that Fred may have had an affair with Mrs. Campino a few years ago and would have done anything for her, but the affair could never have been proven. Fred was not one to fool with, and he was extremely proud of his career. He did his best to keep his nose clean and stayed out of trouble whenever he could. Keith Denby was a forensics investigator, but there was a bit of a shady side to Keith. It was a well-known fact that he had often taken bribes under the table and that he had loved money above everything. Keith was extremely resourceful and also a ladies' man. He also knew Paolo Campino and had done work for him in the past. And he also knew Mrs. Campino. My God. Alex has developed another theory, which refers to being through the eyes of the killer. Alex always likes to do this. Through the eyes of the killer is one of his favorite ways of trying to help us solve our mysteries. And this is what Alex has come up with. The killer had decided to strike when an opportunity had presented itself. They would stalk their victim and strike when appropriate. The arrest. It was a bright, sunny morning in late spring when the cops came calling. The gulls were at play over the calm blue sea, and the spring air was fragrant with blooming flowers. The beach was crowded with sunbathers, and surfers were already enjoying the waves. The suspect was nabbed as he came out of a seaside restaurant, and onlookers would tell you that he was absolutely shocked when his rights were read to him. Needless to say, he went kicking and screaming. Well, can you guess who was arrested? Was it Paolo Campino, the mafia boss? Was it Keith Denby, the forensics specialist? Or was it Fred Gant, the record producer? Who do you think was arrested? Let's go to court and find out more about who was arrested and what was said and what wasn't said, okay? The court was 3/4 full on that day when the defendant was led in, and it was mainly made up of media. The defendant had sat motionless next to his lawyer at the defense table and did not look up. The defendant's lawyer had to get his client to stand when the judge entered. The victim's friends and family had gathered around each other towards the back of the courtroom. The prosecution's case was short and to the point, and they offered the following. The defendant had been stalking his victim for some time. He developed a plan when he discovered that she was going to be vacationing at the seaside hotel. He had followed his victim to the hotel and had waited for an opportune moment to strike. It came the day that the victim had decided to take a walk alone on the beach, and he had struck the moment that she had wandered near an isolated lagoon. Luck was on his side as no one was around. He snuck up behind her and strangled her. Then he had stuffed her into a body bag, which was part of his plan, and had dragged it to the edge of the lagoon. There he had left it for someone to find. Then he walked away, never looking back. Had he taken the time to have looked back, he would have quickly realized that he had made a fatal error. Witnesses came forward to corroborate all of this, and the prosecution put a bow on its case when it produced two surprise witnesses, Maura Lansing and Carolyn Radcliffe. Needless to say, the courtroom erupted when the two ladies were brought in. The prosecution contended that the defendant had killed somebody else and not the intended victim. Carolyn filled in the missing pieces as follows. Her dad had left a document detailing each of the suspect's part in her mom's death. Fred Gaunt had helped Mrs. Campino to remove the body. Keith Denby had falsified the death certificate of Carolyn's mom, and Paolo Campino had paid Keith Denby to do so. The defense had no response to this, and the defendant pleaded for the jury to find for a lesser charge. But in the minds of the jury, according to Alex, now the jury had to decide on the following. Guilty of murder, despite the fact that the defendant had killed someone else? We sent Chip to mingle with the crowd outside of the court. The unanimous opinion was for a guilty verdict. Everyone seemed to be taken in by the entire mystery itself and the playing out of the final outcome. Of course, they salivated on the fact that well-known socialites had been involved, and they expressed sympathy for the family of the victim. We took a straw poll, and the unanimous decision, or not decision, but the unanimous opinion was 100% for a guilty verdict. Well, the jury did not disappoint. Guilty as charged. But who was the real killer? The one who was found guilty was Keith Denby. But there's always a story, and there was a story to this mystery as well. This is what happened. What led to the murder that Maura had witnessed that day? Carolyn's mom, Melissa Radcliffe, had gone to the home of Paolo and Angie Campino to demand that Angie leave her husband, Dr. Christian Radcliffe, alone. An argument had ensued, and Melissa had followed Angie out to the pool. There, the two ladies had continued their verbal fight, and it had quickly developed into a shoving match. Angie, who was much bigger, had had little difficulty pushing Melissa into the pool, and when she had heard a neighbor approaching, she had grabbed a nearby leaf picker and had used it to keep Melissa's body under the water. She knew that Melissa could not swim, so it was very easy for her to drown Melissa in the pool. After her neighbor had gone, she had turned and had spotted a fleeing Mora and her dog Lucky, and she had recognized the young girl immediately. Angie Campino had phoned her good friend Fred Gant to come and help her get rid of Melissa's body, and he had done so. The two had cooked up a story to tell the world that Melissa had fallen in on her own accord as she had been drinking before having come over to Angie's house. Fred had contacted Keith Denby, who had been known in certain circles as someone who was a bit crooked and who loved to take bribes, and a large sum of money was offered to Keith, and he had agreed to go along with the story. Sometime after this, Angie Campino had confessed all to her husband Paolo, and the two had decided to take a wait-and-see attitude. Needless to say that Paolo was very angry about the entire affair, but had decided to do nothing for now. Then Carolyn had found damning info among her dad's papers, detailing the role of each person. Angie Campino, Fred Gant, and Keith Denby. He had first gone to Keith Denby, the forensic specialist, with his suspicions, and in turn, Keith had gone to Paolo Campino, who had paid handsomely to buy Keith's silence. Paolo Campino had then trained his guns on Dr. Christian Radcliffe, and had arranged for him to be poisoned at a function that he had arranged at a restaurant. Keith Denby had supplied the poison. Dr. Christian Radcliffe had left a note among his papers expressing his suspicions to Carolyn, and had warned Carolyn that if anything were to happen to him, she should go to the cops with his suspicions. Then Carolyn had told Mora everything, after Mora had shared her story with her. The two had cooked up a plan to try and flush out Keith Denby, and they had paid her when Keith had shown up at the hotel. Carolyn had started to blackmail Keith, and had left enough hints to let him know that she was going to be at the hotel on vacation for a few days. The chance meeting between Mora and Carolyn was a stage one between them. They had both kept an eye on Keith Denby and watched as he had started to stalk a young lady looking very much like Carolyn. On the day of the killing, the ladies had watched as Denby had followed another young lady looking very much like Carolyn, and they had followed the two. However, they had not bargained for what had happened next. They watched helplessly as Denby strangled the young lady and had then placed her in a body bag. And then they watched in horror as he had dragged the body bag to the edge of the lagoon, leaving it there. After he had left, Carolyn had taken her passport out of her purse, placed it in a Ziploc bag, and then had thrown it into the lagoon. The two ladies had then left the hotel and had come forward to the cops after the body had been discovered. This is the end of this episode, The Baby Bunny. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I wish you a terrific day, a great rest of the week, and please do not forget to keep on smiling. You take care now, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.